While Prabowo Subianto made a three-day visit to attend India's 76th Republic Day as the special guest to Narendra Modi, security experts were watching closely for any announcement of a BrahMos missile deal. Will India be the second BrahMos buyer after the Philippines, beating Vietnam to the punch? And how would this shape the balance of power in the South China Sea and Southeast Asia? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. Joining us today are Roger Liu, National Sun-Yat University International Masters Programme in Asia-Pacific Affairs Assistant Professor, and Sana Hashmi, Taiwan-Asia Exchange Foundation Fellow. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show today. During India's 76th Republic Day celebrations, the country showcased a range of domestically produced weapons, including the main battle tank that you can see here and the Akash air defense missile launcher. Also on display, of course, was the BrahMos supersonic cruise missile, made in a joint venture between India and Russia. India offers two export variants of the BrahMos, a shore-based version and a ship-launched variant. Both can hit land targets or ships. Both have the limited export range of 300 kilometers. A third variant, launched from the Sukhoi Su-30 MKI fighter jet, is not available for export. According to Tribune of India, a $450 million deal to supply Indonesia with 3 batteries and technical know-how was expected to be discussed by the two leaders during Prabowo's visit. Roger, let me come to you first. So, I want to quote to you an expert in India, that's Shrikant Kondapalli of Jawaharlal Nehru University. He told DW, Delhi correspondent, that the negotiations for BrahMos were in advanced stages. And DW also reports that there's going to be a high-level Indonesian defense delegation that will return to India in a few weeks. So can you tell me how soon you expect that there might be an announcement about this deal?
I think it's going to come very soon because BrahMos is designed to deal with big surface vessels as the target, especially the aircraft carriers that China has been using to pose threats in South China Sea. And not only Indonesia will not be the only ASEAN countries who got this weapon. The Philippines has got it. So Indonesia is getting it, is making a lot of reasons and sense. And it is cheap, it is lethal because it travels supersonic. So as also a claimant of the South China Sea, Indonesia actually is doing a counterbalance or a balancing act because Indonesia has been closing to China on the high-speed rail and all the other economic cooperations. So now they're going to balance against China by militarily getting closer to India and other countries.
Right. And Sana, let's talk about the South China Sea and India's position and role in that.
I think, of course, there is a strong strategic rationale behind why Indonesia is going for BrahMos and why Indonesia is reaching out to India when it comes to security and strategic relations. But apart from that, I think there are a lot of other reasons as well. If you look at India-Indonesia relations, India has been one of the most reliable partners for Indonesia, for countries in the region. And in fact, India doesn't have any dispute with any of the countries in the region. And I feel the Southeast Asia is one region where India could actually go and sell weapons, where India is trying to take up a bigger role, where India is trying to become a security guarantor. Now we have Trump again. And US role in the Southeast Asian region as security guarantor has already won. So India is definitely an important alternative to these countries.
Right. How would you distinguish India's role from the US? The US also doesn't have a claim in the South China Sea.
I think if you look at US track record, of course, US has been a traditional arms supplier to a lot of countries, be it Taiwan and even Southeast Asian countries as well. But if you look at the track record, even Taiwan is waiting for the weapons that it has already paid for. And according to different estimates, it's US 20 billion worth of weapon. So then if Taiwan is not getting it, what is the chance that Southeast Asian countries will get it on time?
Do you see that the shared common interests and common concerns are driving Indonesia and India together?
Absolutely. China has been one of the major factors for like-minded countries to come and have a collective response to China's aggression in the region. But then I won't really narrow it down to China. India's relationship with Indonesia goes back to 1940s, 1950s. And of course, now they have an additional factor. And for India, specifically when it comes to BrahMos, when it comes to strengthening defense ties in the region, it's more like hitting 2 targets with one bow. So there is definitely China factor there.
Would you agree, though, that China is one of the major factors that is drawing an already close relationship even closer?
I think it's just not with India, Indonesia. I think a lot of countries are just thinking and looking for other options. And absolutely, China is driving a lot of countries together, and they are willing to form a response where they have to kind of face a more aggressive, more assertive, and a militarily stronger China. So absolutely, Indonesia has to think about protecting its EEZ. India has to think about protecting its own borders, and then how to ensure that the regional stability is ensured. So then I think these are some of the major factors why India, Indonesia are looking to cooperate further in strengthening their defense ties.
And Roger, you talked about balancing, counterbalancing. What do you read in the fact that Prabowo actually chose China as the very first overseas state visit after taking office? The US was his second. He and Xi Jinping signed $10 billion worth of deals.
Well, if you check the general trend, you will find that a lot of ASEAN countries now have been chosen China, actually, especially economically and culturally. So the US has been remaining defense advantages over there. So a lot of ASEAN countries and the new leaders, when they choose Beijing as their first destination, it doesn't surprise anyone. However, like I said, they are still trying to balance between different great powers. So Prabowo actually has been trying to deviate from the traditional ASEAN and non-alignment-based diplomatic path to approachment to great powers. So firstly, of course, he has to visit China, and secondly, he visited the United States, and thirdly, he approached India. So I think large countries like Indonesia have been trying to make a balance between these three great powers by making a balance among themselves.
How does all of this, the BrahMos sales, we talked about obviously the Philippines and also Vietnam, how is this shaping India's sort of overall strategic profile in this region, and maybe given that China has likely transferred nuclear ballistic missiles to Pakistan, submarines to Myanmar, Bangladesh, all of that impinged on India's security?
I think from the Indian perspective, this is a good development because India has been trying to reach out to its immediate neighborhood. After 1991, they announced Look East policy, and it was transferred to be Act East policy when Modi came to power. But after a long time, actually, India has been talking a lot without doing a lot. But it's good to see that with the rise of China, actually, India has been practically and doing something to approach itself to different countries like Vietnam, like the Philippines, like Indonesia. By approaching these three real important players in that region surrounding South China Sea, actually India has been put a lot of much more strategic weight on that side of the earth to balance against China's appearance along its border, for example, the Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal.
Right.
That's a very necessary counterweight.
Right, yeah. And in terms of counterweights, Sana, what signal do you think this sends to China from India?
I think one of the major signals that China is going to read out of it is that India is prepared to take up a bigger role. And then India is not really, apart from other countries, India is one country that is not leaving the entire region to become China's backyard. And it's just not selling arms. India, and of course, this is going to definitely bolster India's Make in India strategy. And India is definitely fitting well within this broader context. But apart from that, I think this is a very important lesson for China, that China just cannot do whatever it wants to do in India's extended and immediate neighborhood. And
without consequences.
Without consequences. And I do feel that if, of course, countries are not talking about China directly as of now, but if tomorrow there's a conflict in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait, we definitely see, and if we look at the developments that are happening, I think there's a clear signal that they're going to definitely play a bigger role. They're definitely going to do something to stop China in the region.
Okay, well, let's turn now to the bilateral relationship between the two countries. Both leaders spoke about ties between their countries stretching over millennia. From as early as the 5th century, traders from India's Sri Vijaya Empire sailed to the Malay Peninsula, Indochina and Java, spreading Sanskrit, Hinduism and Buddhism. In fact, the name Indonesia comes from the Greek words Indos and Nessos, which mean Indian islands. Indonesia was first colonized in the 1500s and India in the 1700s by European powers, with India supporting Indonesia's independence struggle from 1945 to 1949. In turn, Indonesia's first president, Sukarno, was the guest of honor at India's first Republic Day in 1950. As a result, India and Indonesia were leaders in the non-alignment movement, which was formed in 1961. Back to 2025, during his visit, President Prabowo made a surprise announcement. Take a look.
The President, Prime Minister and Vice President, distinguished friends, a few weeks ago, I had my genetic sequencing test and my DNA test, and they tell me that I have Indian DNA.
So, Roger, a nice sort of personal link there between, Indonesia and India. Do you think that it does reflect that very closeness that they have, the sort of the cultural and even blood bonds?
Well, I think when Prabowo says that they're linked, India and Indonesia are linked, he is not only speaking out of courtesy, it's on reality as well. Because you can find that there are a lot of shared parts of India-Indonesian culture, like the word Sanskrit being used. In Indian, God is referred to as Bhagwan, and in Indonesia, Bahasa Indonesia is Bhagawan. So it's almost the same. They share a lot of examples like that. And politically as well. In the 1950s, Panchashila or Panchshil, actually it's commonly shared by India and Indonesia. So like you have referred in the 1950s, Sukarno and the support of Indians for the Revolutionary Act, actually that has constituted a great political foundation for these two countries to come. And now it comes the rise of China. So I think for them to get together, it's so naturally happen.
Right. And 75 years later, Sana, again, we have an Indonesian president, Prabowo this time, attending as chief guest. What do you think that selection says about India's emphasis on relations with Indonesia?
I think it's a very important indicator of where the relationship is headed, because for India specifically, if India is inviting any leader for its Republic Day parade, because India is actually exhibiting its military capabilities as well. So first, it means that you are a friend and we want to invite you. As Roger also talked about God. And in Indian culture, a guest is equal to God. And for a Republic Day parade, if an Indonesian president is coming, it means that, that the relationship has reached a level where we could invite Indonesian president to the parade. But apart from that, from Indonesian side as well, it shows that how Indonesia wants to reaffirm its commitment to strengthening ties with India. So definitely there is a two-way process going on. Both sides want to take the relationship to the next level, and we have seen now just not cultural, economic, but also defense ties have been deepened. So definitely it's an important indicator of how strong India-Indonesia relations have been since the 1940s.
Right, yeah. Roger, so how do you think that this trip in particular advanced the relationships for both sides? We know that in 2018 they signed the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. So already diplomatically they're at the same on the highest level. How far, much further did this visit take it?
Well, I think, like you have mentioned, based on the 2018 cooperation of maritime affairs, I think that's very important because now imminent threat that China has been posing to the Southeast Asian countries are from its coast guards, because China has the largest fleet of coast guards in the world, and they try to play the gray zone tactics without using their navy directly against these navies in Southeast Asian countries. They use their CGs or the coast guard ships. And this is time for India and Indonesia, both are maritime countries, to work together, because there's a very important part for them to enhance the coast guard intra-Coast Guard collaborations between these two Coast Guards.
Right.
So that's very important. I think they're getting the right point.
Okay, let's go to that. So Modi and Prabowo signed several agreements, including those to strengthen bilateral cooperation in defense and security. Moving forward, both nations plan to enhance joint military exercises and security exchanges. Following the visit, the Indian Coast Guard said it renewed an agreement with the Indonesian Coast Guard for a period of 3 years. Both sides have carried out Indian Ocean joint patrols since 2002. Sana, what impact do you think that these outcomes would have on the security, the stability of the South China Sea?
What I've seen, this is not a new development, and I feel this one visit is not going to change anything or elevate relationship, because the relationship has already been elevated. And at least from India's side, and in fact from Indonesia's side, it's very clear that both sides want to deepen their defense ties. And India is a welcome party when it comes to security cooperation in the region. India is a friendly country in the region, and this is one of the reasons. And in fact, India is not considered as an external party when it comes to a conflict in the region. India sends its patrol ship on friendly visits to all these countries. Then apart from that, India consistently conducts bilateral maritime exercises. And in fact, Indonesia was one of the first countries to have a maritime joint statement with India, apart from Malaysia. So this tells us the depth of the defense cooperation between India and Indonesia. And in fact, this is a part of broader objective of India playing a greater role in the region, and Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines welcoming India and perhaps looking at joint cooperation. And India has in fact have been involved in oil exploration activities with Vietnam. Then the level of defense cooperation with Philippines is also growing. Then now we are seeing Indonesia. So I think this is a part of India's Act East policy, and this is one of the reasons why we call this policy one of the most successful policies in the world of policy frameworks.
So you don't think, in terms of the, let's talk about the personal relationships between Modi and Prabowo, that the relationship could become, warmer between the two countries?
Absolutely. In fact, if we just talk about how Modi's foreign policy has changed India's foreign policy, Modi has kind of brought his personalized diplomacy, be it President Trump, be it Southeast Asian leaders. We have seen that how Modi have called all these leaders as friends and brothers. So Modi hug diplomacy is something that we have seen all over. So I think this is no different with respect to Indonesia. But of course, as of now, I do see, given the depth of the relationship, the potential has not been realized. There's definitely a lot of potential for these countries to realize. And I do feel that Modi and now Prabowo being in Indonesia, and in fact, when Joko Widodo was there, other leaders, India's relationship with Indonesia has been very consistent. But I do believe that now Modi's personalized diplomacy with the Indonesian leader could also take it to the next level.
Right, and obviously, Roger, the fact that he was a former defense minister might mean that there is more of a focus on the defense and security side of their relationship.
Right, and on the political spectrum, they both believe belongs to the right side and referred to as commonly populist. I'm using it as a neutral term. That they focus more on their people's welfare and they focus more on the national interests. So I think that also helped to bring them close together.
Now, India also marks 75 years of diplomatic ties with China. India Foreign Ministry Vikram Misri visited Beijing in late January, meeting with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Vice Minister Sun Weidong. China asked India to resume direct flights, which were suspended in 2020, and agreed to facilitate the return of Indian pilgrims to Tibet for the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra pilgrimage to Mount Kailash and Lake Mansarovar in Tibet. It's considered a sacred journey for Hindus, Buddhists and Jains. Additionally, both sides plan to reshare cross-border river data. Let's listen to the words of Foreign Secretary Misri. Watch this.
We are on our way to stabilizing the relationship. I cannot overemphasize the importance of communications between our two countries, and I would like to specifically record the contribution that you personally have made in maintaining these communications at various levels between our two leaderships.
Sana, did you think that there was sort of some careful selection of words there from the foreign minister? Usually we hear sort of, shared commitments, shared values, shared objectives. This was really very narrowly focused on just communication.
Absolutely. I feel that since 2020, this is a very consistent stand of India. If you look at the language, verbal as well as joint statement, official document, this is something that we would see very calculated and measured response from India's side. And as you mentioned, that there is no shared commitment for regional stability peace because there's nothing common in India and China as of now. Their perspective right now, the major objective is to just kind of de-escalate tensions and manage whatever they have been able to achieve in October 2024. So I think even though a lot of scholars, a lot of media is talking about this thaw in India-China relations, so I think we have to take our time and see where these relations go. I don't really see as a reset in India-China relation, and this is something that we are also seeing in the statements that are coming out from the officials.
Would you agree with that, Roger? It's not a reset. It's very careful management, perhaps by the Indian side. We've heard that it was China that asked for the flights to be resumed. You know, how significant is that? How significant is allowing pilgrims back into Tibet?
Well, I don't think it's a breakthrough. It's not a reset. It's just not even return to the normal, because you have to remember in 1950, China is the first Asian country that recognized India as the independent power. So they used to be really good with each other. And we have to remember in 2015, 1 year after Modi became the prime minister, he visited China and Xi Jinping visited India as well. They signed a very large framework that covers almost everything that promotes the high-level humanistic collaborations. But nothing happens after that. So now they're talking about the resume of direct flights, personal exchange, people-to-people exchange. You have to remember India and China are having normal diplomatic relations, and now they're talking about people-to-people exchange. So you can see that they are not resuming back status quo ante before the 2020 Galwan Valley conflict.
Okay, and that was obviously a very big red line, Sana, the Galwan, the tragedy at Galwan Valley, where we understand 20 Indian soldiers were killed. For you, in terms of these latest announcements, what were the most significant aspects for both sides? What is it that for India was of most value and for China?
I think, as Roger mentioned, that this is just kind of managing relations. So, and both countries have diplomatic relations since 1950. So now imagine we are still talking about things like, okay, we have to resume direct flight, we have to talk about people-to-people relations. So I feel that the underlying fact is there is still mutual distrust, specifically from India's side. I think it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when the next standoff is going to take place and when the relationship are going to go back to how it was in the past 4 years. So I do believe that in the past 4 years, whatever has happened, it will take a lot of effort from the Chinese side, a lot of efforts to kind of bridge this trust deficit. And I don't think India could do anything. China has to put in more effort to make India realize that, you know, we are a reliable partner. And I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
So the side with more leverage, you are saying, is India?
I absolutely believe so.
Roger, let's briefly talk about BRICS. Under Prabowo's leadership, Indonesia has officially joined BRICS as its first Southeast Asian nation, expanding the bloc that began with Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa to 10 members. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs promptly issued a statement welcoming the move. So, Roger, let's go back now again to Indonesia's perspective. What benefit does it bring Indonesia? Do you think it's sort of material benefits, or is it more to do with status?
Well, I think, of course, to join new multilateral organizations or mechanisms like BRIC is a good development for Indonesia because, like I said, they are developing their own new path of diplomacy. Outside of ASEAN, they try to reach out to great powers as well. So joining BRICS is a good development. And from the Indian side, actually, Indians has been using Indonesia as an ally or a counterweight to counterbalance China's growing influence in BRICS. Because if we remember, in the last expansion of BRICS, China tried to introduce Pakistan and Iran into BRICS by expanding that. That actually dilute the power of the traditional powers like Brazil and India. So India are trying to get friendly powers like Indonesia inside of that to counter China's balance.
Right, right. So there is that benefit to India. Sana, however, Under the previous Indonesian leader, Joko Widodo, he was quite careful and cautious about joining BRICS. Would you say that was because they didn't want to send a signal to the US that they were moving into China's orbit? And so therefore, how is it different now under Prabowo?
I think that multipolarity and multilateral institutions have been in fashion, and now it has become that a lot of countries have expressed interest in joining the SCU and BRICS. I don't think it's, of course, a lot of countries are also realizing they cannot really rely on the US, specifically under Trump. And we have seen things like, US is going to be isolationist, anti-multilateral institutions. So, of course, this gives them a reason to perhaps go and join and explore institutions such as BRICS and SCO. But apart from that, I do believe that India and Indonesia are two countries that are truly practicing multi-alignment. And it's not really about, perhaps it's about getting away from the US, reducing their reliance on the US, but it's also about reducing reliance on China. These institutions are not dominated by China as a lot of people believe, but I do believe that it's more about moving in all directions, enhance their diplomacy and practice multipolarity and multi-alignment.
And also coming back to that theme of the counterbalancing, especially if India and Indonesia are on the same side. We're going to have to wrap it up now. Thank you so much, Roger Liu and Sana Hashmi, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.
Taiwan Plus original series, Making Waves Beyond Taiwan. The Pursuit of a Cinematic Dream, Tsai Ming-liang, New York Festival's TV and Film Awards, Bronze Award. A documentary where Tsai reflects on his cinematic process and the future of his career. Road to Legacy, 57th Golden Bell Awards, Best Sound Design. A series that introduces 10 indie artists and bands and their road to musical stardom. More Film Festival approved Taiwan Plus originals. Bringing Taiwan to the world. Only on Taiwan Plus.